Good evening and welcome to the Standing Resolution, the show where we take the arguments you've been having in Slack, in conference rooms, and yes, in very long email threads, and we actually settle them. Or at least, we make them considerably more interesting. Tonight's question touches something almost everyone with a job has felt in the last few years, where we work has changed, how we work has changed, and whether any of that has made us better at working together. Well, that's exactly what we're here to find out. Tonight's resolution is this: remote work builds better teams than the office. Now, before we go any further, a word about how we do things here. Each of our debaters was assigned their position. They didn't choose it. That's intentional. The best way to understand an argument is to have to make it, even when it's uncomfortable, even when it cuts against your instincts. What you're about to hear are the strongest versions of each case, built by people who had to go looking for them. On one side, we have a debater who will argue that remote work is not just a convenience, but a genuinely superior environment for building strong, cohesive, high-functioning teams.
Let me start with something concrete. Think about the last time you had a genuinely important conversation with a colleague, one where something real got worked out, something got understood. Where did it happen? I'd wager it wasn't in the middle of an open-plan office with fluorescent lights humming overhead and 3 other conversations bleeding into yours. It happened somewhere quieter, somewhere you could actually think. Remote work is that quieter place, scaled up and made permanent. Here's the principle I want you to hold on to tonight. Strong teams are not built by proximity. They're built by trust, by clear communication, and by the experience of being relied upon and coming through. None of those things require a shared zip code. What remote work actually does is force the habits that good teams need anyway. When you can't tap someone on the shoulder, you learn to write clearly. When you can't read a room, you learn to ask better questions. When your work can't be seen, it has to speak for itself. Remote teams develop a discipline around communication that most office teams never bother to acquire because they don't have to. And here's what often goes unspoken about TH.
My opponent just made a beautiful case for discipline. And I'll grant him this much: remote work can teach discipline. But discipline is not a team. A team is something else entirely, and that distinction is exactly what this debate is about. Let me offer you a principle of my own. Teams are not built by information transfer. They're built by shared experience. By the moment you see a colleague completely stumped, and you stay late together to figure it out. By the lunch where someone mentions offhand that their mother is sick, and suddenly you understand why they've seemed distracted. By the 10-second conversation in a hallway that reroutes a project before it goes off a cliff. These moments are not inefficiencies. They are the connective tissue of a functioning team. Remote work optimizes for the signal and discards the noise. But some of what looks like noise is actually load-bearing. The ambient awareness you develop when you share a physical space, knowing who is overwhelmed, who is energized, who is quietly brilliant and never says so. That awareness builds judgment. It builds the kind of trust that isn't just about reliability on deliverables. It's about knowing a person.
Both sides just drew their lines in the sand: proximity versus discipline, connective tissue versus clean communication, and neither one has had a chance to respond to what they just heard. That changes in a moment. Don't go anywhere, because the rebuttals are where the real argument begins, and I have a feeling things are about to get considerably less polite. Welcome back, I'm Justice Vale, and you're watching the Standing Resolution. Tonight we're debating whether remote work builds better teams than the office, and our 2 debaters have just laid out their opening cases. Now it's time to respond. Rebuttals are up next.
Holly's made a genuinely moving case. The sick mother at lunch, the late-night debugging session, the hallway conversation that saves a project. I don't want to dismiss those moments, they're real, but I want to ask a harder question about them. How many people in your office actually get them? Because here's what the romantic version of office life tends to leave out. Those spontaneous, humanizing moments, they don't distribute evenly. They flow along lines of proximity, personality, and frankly, similarity. The person who's gregarious gets them, the introvert who eats at their desk doesn't. The new hire who doesn't know the unwritten social rules of the floor gets left out of the hallway conversation entirely. The ambient awareness Holly's is describing isn't neutral, it has favorites. Remote work, by contrast, forces you to build structure around inclusion. The check-in that happens on a call happens for everyone on the call. The documentation that gets written for the whole team, not just the people who happen to be nearby when someone figured something out. And on the question of pressure, Holly said thin remote relationships only reveal themselves at the end.
Mordecai just made inclusion the heart of his rebuttal, and I want to engage that seriously because it's his strongest point. He's right that office culture can have favorites. The gregarious person gets the hallway moment, the introvert gets left out. That's a real failure, and it deserves to be named. But notice what he's actually arguing. He's not arguing that remote work builds better relationships. He's arguing that offices sometimes build bad ones. Those are not the same claim, and I don't want us to slide past that. The solution to uneven inclusion in a physical space is to build a more intentional physical culture. That's hard, but it's possible, and it preserves everything else the office gives you. The solution remote work offers is to eliminate the space entirely and replace organic connection with structured connection. And structured connection is genuinely useful, but it has a ceiling. You can schedule a check-in. You cannot schedule the moment someone reveals something true about themselves. Here's the deeper problem with Mordecai's framing. He keeps describing remote work's advantages as things that can be built with enough discipline and good process. But dissip.
Mordecai, you've argued that remote work forces better communication habits, clearer writing, more deliberate questions, documentation for everyone. I'll grant you the discipline. But here's what I want to press you on. When a team is brand new, people who have never met, never shared a room, never had a single unstructured moment together, what exactly is the trust being built on before those good habits have had any time to form?
That's a fair challenge, and I won't dodge it. In the early days of a remote team, trust isn't built on habit yet, it's built on something more fundamental. It's built on the first time someone delivers what they said they would on time without anyone watching over them. That moment carries weight precisely because there was no safety net of shared space to fall back on. And here's what I'd add. New teams and offices aren't automatically trusting either. Plenty of people have sat across from a colleague for months and still felt like strangers. The office doesn't conjure trust, it just creates opportunities that may or may not be used. Remote work creates different opportunities, smaller, more deliberate ones, and when a new team learns to use them well, the trust they build is earned rather than assumed. Earned trust tends to hold.
Hollies, you've put a lot of weight on those unscripted human moments, the hallway conversation, the offhand lunch confession. But here's the thing. You've also acknowledged that office culture doesn't distribute those moments evenly. So my question is specific. If the raw material you're describing is already being rationed by personality and proximity, why is reforming office culture the answer rather than abandoning the system that created the inequality in the first place?
That's the sharpest version of the challenge, and I want to meet it honestly. Yes, office culture rations those moments unfairly sometimes. But notice what you're asking me to accept as the alternative, a system that eliminates the moments entirely and calls that progress. That's not solving the distribution problem. That's burning down the kitchen because someone got a smaller portion. The inequality in offices is a design failure, not an indictment of physical space itself. You can redesign a culture. You can build deliberate rituals, change who leads meetings, rethink how space is used. What you cannot do in a remote environment is manufacture genuine spontaneity. You can approximate it, but approximations have limits. Abandoning the office because some offices are badly run is like abandoning conversation because some people are bad listeners. The answer is to get better at the thing, not to replace it with something thinner.
Up next is the moment that separates this show from every other debate you've ever watched, the Steelman round, where each debater has to stand up and make the strongest possible case for the side they've been fighting against all night. It is as uncomfortable as it sounds, and it is not to be missed. Stay with us. Welcome back to the Standing Resolution. I'm Justice Vale, and tonight we've been debating whether remote work builds better teams than the office. What comes next is the part of the show I find genuinely fascinating, the Steelman round, where each debater has to make the best possible case for the other side.
Here is the strongest thing Hollies has said tonight, and I want to say it better than Hollies did. Human beings are not information processing units. We are social animals who evolved to read faces, to sense the shift in someone's posture, to notice the exhaustion behind someone's eyes before they've said a word. The office is not an arbitrary tradition. It is an environment that happens to match the kind of creature we actually are. When you share physical space with people over time, you build a model of them that no amount of written communication can replicate. You know how they act under pressure because you've seen it. You know who steadies and who unravels. You know whose silence means contentment and whose means trouble. That knowledge, granular, embodied, built slowly, is the foundation of the deepest professional trust most people ever experience. And remote work, however well designed, is asking us to build that kind of trust while working against our own nature. That is a serious argument. I've sat with it, and I think it's genuinely true that something is harder at a distance. But harder is not the same as impossible, and the question tonight is not which environ me.
Here is the strongest thing Mordecai has said tonight, and I want to give it its full due. Remote work doesn't just change where you work. It changes who gets to work. Think about the talented parent who can't be in the office by 8 because school drop-off exists. Think about the person with a chronic illness who can do exceptional work, but cannot do it in a building with a 2-hour commute attached. Think about the brilliant introvert who produces their best thinking in silence and spends half their office day managing the social cost of an open floor plan. The office, for all its warmth and spontaneity, has always had a quiet cover charge. Remote work waives it. And when you build a team from a wider, more genuinely diverse pool of people who were previously priced out by geography, by caregiving, by physical circumstance, you don't just get more inclusion. You get better ideas. You get perspectives that the office was structurally selecting against for decades. That is not a small thing. That is the argument at its most powerful, and it deserves to be taken seriously. I do take it seriously, and yet, diversity of input is not the same as cohesion of team. You can.
We've heard the best cases for both sides, including from the people arguing against them. Now comes the moment that matters most, closing arguments, where each debater gets one last shot to tell you why their side should win. After that, the decision is yours. Stay with us. Welcome back. I'm Justice Vale, and this is the standing resolution. Both sides have made their strongest case, granted their opponent's best point, and still held their ground. Now it comes down to this, closing arguments, one final shot each, and then the resolution stands or falls on your judgment.
Here is what tonight has actually established. The case for the office rests on moments: the hallway collision, the lunch confession, the late night that becomes a war story. Those moments are real, I never denied them, but they are not a system. They are luck, distributed unevenly, enjoyed most by the people who least need help feeling included, and unavailable entirely to everyone the office quietly turned away before they ever got in the door. Remote work is not the absence of those moments. It is the replacement of luck with intention, and intention, applied consistently over time, does not produce a worse team. It produces a more honest one, a team that knows exactly what it is, because it had to build itself without the comfortable fiction that sharing a floor means sharing a purpose. Hollies argued tonight that discipline is a workaround for missing human connection. I'd say the opposite. Comfortable proximity is a workaround for missing discipline. And when the pressure comes, and it always comes, I would rather stand with a team that learned to trust each other on purpose than one that assumed the trust was there because they could see each other's faces. Remote work.
Mordecai just told you that intention beats luck, and I agree with him. Intention is essential, but here is what he's left out. Intention is a practice, not a place. You can bring intention into an office. You cannot bring the office into a remote channel. Tonight, I have acknowledged everything worth acknowledging on the other side. The access argument is real. The inclusion failures of bad office culture are real. I gave those points their full weight because they deserve it. But granting a problem is not the same as granting the solution. Here is what this debate comes down to. Remote work optimizes for the measurable, the deliverable, the document, the response time. The office gives you access to the unmeasurable, the person behind the role, the human being you will actually need to know when things go wrong. Mordecai calls that luck. I call it the entire substrate of trust. Teams are not built from outputs. They are built from people who know each other well enough to be honest, to cover for each other, to say the hard thing in the room. That knowing is harder to build at a distance. Not impossible. Harder. And in team building, harder means fewer people succeed. The off.
And that is where we leave it tonight. Mordecai Quill built a case for intention, for the team that earns its trust rather than inherits it from a shared zip code. Holly's Vega built a case for the irreplaceable, for the human knowledge that grows slowly in a shared space and holds when everything else is under pressure. Both of them, at their best tonight, made me think harder about something I thought I already understood. That's the whole point of this show. Who won, that is entirely up to you. The resolution stands or falls on your judgment, not mine. I just ask the questions around here. If you want to weigh in on tonight's debate, or if you want to vote on what we argue about next week, head over to Paxelle.tv. The next resolution is waiting for you there, and I promise it will start at least 3 arguments in your household before the opening statements are finished. One thing worth knowing before you go, the debaters you heard tonight are AI personas, and the positions they argued were assigned to them, not chosen. What you heard were the strongest versions of each case, built on purpose. Whether those cases reflect anyone's actual beliefs, well, that's a debate.